We jump over to you, my friend. What can you share with us about what you've seen out there and what Marsh does different to bridge the gap between the claims experience and the homeowner's expectations?
Of course, and OP, I appreciate you having us here to talk about these things. Um, I'd say the first thing and most common thing with the claims process is that the homeowner needs to think of it as a process. And what does that mean? And you brought up some very important things. Most people's lives are very busy anyway. And now to have a claim on top of that, where it's impacting your home, where you can maybe not live there anymore, or at least partially, it's going to give you maybe a year of additional issues you need to deal with over time if you have only a partial damage, for instance. We're helping all these types of people through that experience. And I have several, I can recollect back to that first week or two where I had several homeowners report up through my team here at Marsh MMA that we are so grateful to have you. I'm standing here in the front yard. My house is burned down or it's partially down. We're just collecting up some of our effects. I'm talking to my neighbors. They don't have anyone to talk to about this. And I'm just so grateful that you can reassure me that I'm doing the right things. I'm thinking about the right things. You're helping me think about how to get organized and just start down that path. And just to know you're there. So if I'm now a couple of weeks further down that path of recovery and I have more questions, or I'm being told things that I would like a second opinion on, that you're there to help me with those.
Welcome to the All Things Wildfire podcast, where we delve into the latest trends and hot topics in protecting properties against wildfire. So sit back, relax, and join us as we arm you against disaster.
Hey everyone, welcome to another All Things Wildfire podcast. And today we have two special guests from the Marsh team. We've got Brad Sawyer, who's in charge of risk advisory. He's a risk advisory leader with Marsh. And then we have Robert Clemmons, concierge claims experience. And so we've got really both sides. We've got the front end of a brokerage firm that says, hey, here's what you could do to make your home more resilient. And then when there is a claim, you have the other side, which is, hey, hold on a second. I'm the concierge. Let me guide you and walk you through the claims experience. And so I'm glad, guys, that we're able to get on today because through this episodic event that we just had of wildfires here on January 7th, both of you have probably been very, very busy, right? Brad, you're talking to people about resiliency. Robert, you and your team are probably busy as heck going, okay, let me walk you through the claims process and set up some foundational expectations. And so I think let's jump right in. Excuse me, guys. Let's jump right in and talk about what, Brad, I think we can start with you. What are your thoughts with regards to what people can do now that the fire has taken place in its past? What can people do to make their homes more resilient?
Yeah, thanks, OP. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having us on. The wildfire events that took place with the Palisades and Eaton fires in California in January, I feel like these were kind of like the Hurricane Andrew event for hurricanes in Florida. That was really Florida's wake-up call that we need to start doing things differently. They started looking at the building codes differently. They started updating so that people had to build with concrete, started looking at impact rated windows and doors, changed the way roof to wall connections were done. So for me, this was the first event that kind of woke people up because I've been talking to people about wildfire and what to do for their homes for over 15 years now. And I think anyone that's in the industry would tell you the same thing. Most people are kind of interested in it. Some of them don't agree with everything we're trying to tell them to do because they like their landscaping around the house. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there's been enough science, there's been enough engineering to prove that what we're recommending people do, and now with insurance carriers, it's becoming a requirement. It does work. I think most critically, we got to look at home hardening. We got to look at how homes are built going forward with rebuilds in the Palisades. I think there's different technologies that are out there that people should explore, and we've been helping to drive those conversations with clients just to make them aware that there are different techniques for rebuilding a home, not just frame with stucco over it. So I think people need to consider their options on that front. But then if they do decide to go back with frame and stucco, we got to look at the home hardening. We need to make sure that if they have vents on the house, those are mitigated with ember resistant vents. If they have gutters, there's gutter guards. If they the 0 to 5, when you work into defensible space, then is most critical, as we've seen, and everybody keeps pounding on because it's the most critical space. Ultimately, the objective is to keep the fire away from the house, but you're still going to have embers coming towards your home, regardless of where you are, if you're in a wildfire space. So then you need to protect your property from the ember cast that's coming in. So Palisades was a little different. Eaton Fire was a little different because there was a lot of conflagration, which I think we need to, make people aware of. That's why we're talking to them about different technologies and rebuilding their home that are more resilient, especially in those spaces. Because if your neighbor's house is going down and you're 8 feet from roof line to roof line, there's a higher probability your house will be lost in that fire as well too, with the right conditions. So all things are on the table. We're really trying to drive people towards resilience and making sure that decisions they make now in rebuilds will help them long term with this property.
Wow, you just you just downloaded a ton of information right now, Brad, and I love it. I think a couple things I want to touch on. For the people rebuilding, 100%, the code is going to be there to kind of help guide them. But beyond that, there's still some things that they can do to make their homes more resilient. 100%. I want to touch on even the people where their homes survived and they still live in the WUI, right? The wildland urban interface. Like this is most of us still have watched the footage and understand. Holy moly! Like there's so much destruction, and I really do believe that, like you had shared earlier, this is our wake up call to have this realization of, hey, look, it's a matter of time before we get an evacuation notice, right? This is going to happen if we live in these areas, and being prepared is absolutely crucial. And so you talked about a handful of things. We've seen a few different examples. You see some homes where only the roof is burning. There's no vegetation burning around them at all. It's by itself, and the roof is ignited on fire. And that likely is because you had ember intrusion into the attic space through the vents, and you have ignition. And so that can be prevented with ember-resistant vents. And so I think if you're listening to this as a homeowner, like, the easiest thing to do is to look that up and see what you can do to get those installed. You also talked about the gutter guards, right? You have exposed gutters, and if you don't have any guards on them, you're going to have pine needles, you're going to have dry brush, you're going to have leaves in there. And when the embers come and they could ignite that, now with enough heat, they can ignite the roof, and now you have ignition there too. You also mentioned 0 to 5. And I think, Brad, you're right on. 0 to 5 is probably the most vulnerable area. And 0 to 5 meaning, for you listening, if you take your stucco wall or your siding wall on the outside and you just move 5 feet away from it, that is considered the 0 to 5 space around your property. That is the most vulnerable. And oftentimes you're going to see some shrubs that are in front of a window. That's kind of decorative. And the problem behind that, in what Brad explained earlier, is you're going to have ember casts, and they're going to drop down and they're going to ignite any dry brush, any dry leaves. And now that radiant heat is going to blow out the window. And now you've got a major problem, and your home is now ignited. There's so many things here, listeners, that you can do just on your own. The 0 to 5 is basically a weekend, right? Commit to removing. And I think that's the biggest thing in our minds. We just got to say, okay, we're going to be committed to it, and then actually put in the time and energy to make that happen.
So I think it's when you look at the 0 to 5, I explain it like when you have a bonfire. What do you start with? You start with the little wood first. There's your mulch. What is the little wood burn? The little bit bigger wood, which is your bushes, and then that continues to burn bigger and bigger fuel beyond it. So clearing out that vegetation. Ultimately, what's going to happen? The embers are still going to come. We need to learn to live with wildfire because it's not going anywhere. But the embers should hit the side of the structure, drop down, and there should be nothing combustible there. So that's kind of the way I describe it. And then when you were talking about the vents, I just feel like there's still such a misconception when it comes to how what people can do to protect the roofs from catching fire. I was watching the news one night, and they showed a gentleman who was doing everything he can to prepare his home for wildfire. He's up on the roof with a hose, spraying his concrete tile roof, which is non-combustible. And what he's doing instead, he's walking past 3 vents on that same roof that he should be sealing off to prevent embers from getting in there. The news
Oh.
doesn't know any better. The homeowner doesn't know any better. And unfortunately, if the fire had gotten closer to his house, he probably would have lost it simply because he missed what he should have been doing that was most critical. So I think education's really still so critical, even though we've been living with wildfire for a long time. We've learned so much in the last 15 years. I mean, even the IBHS was on one of the Good Morning shows in 2013, highlighting the effects of wood shake roofs and what they can do, and also defensible space around the property. So it goes back quite a ways.
Yeah, I think I was watching the same footage, and I am like, "What is going on here? You're watering down your concrete tile roof. What's happening?"
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
incredible. And so I love your example, Brad, and I'm going to borrow it in the future, like the whole campfire thing. I love that. One of the things that I'll add, connecting to and bridging over to the community resiliency. And Robert, I haven't forgotten about you, brother. I got you.
No worries.
We're going to come to you right now because I know a lot of listeners also want to hear about the claims experience, right? But before we move on to you, I think the community resiliency is also there's such a big need. And to use your campfire analogy, Brad, I tell people, hey, when you've been too close to a campfire, right? You walk up to it and you're like, wow, let me back up, right? The flame didn't touch you, but you can feel it. And you're like, okay, I'm in a zone I don't belong. And that's what takes place when another home next to you, 8 feet away, Brad, catches fire. That home ignites. Now you've got, you got all this heat coming your way in your home. And it really, it doesn't matter what you've done to your home at that point. If your neighbors are not contributing and your neighbors do not have the same mindset, then we're going to fall victim to, how well they've been keeping their home resilient. Can you add a little bit more on that as far as the
Yeah.
importance of community resiliency?
Yeah, I mean, once one domino falls, once one structure catches fire, it's easier for the next structure to catch fire when it's 8, 10 feet away. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these fires in the conflagration or structure to structure fire event, when a structure is burning, that will burn for hours. That's a lot of heat for a long period of time. Eventually, siding, stucco could be compromised just from the heat of that structure. Whereas in a true vegetation fire next to the structure, you're going to get some heat, but it's going to burn out in a couple minutes, maybe 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what that actual fuel is. So it's a lot shorter period where that fuel is burning, whereas the fuel from a structure next to you is going to burn for hours, which makes it even more easy for your window to be compromised, for the siding to be compromised, or another something closer to your house to catch fire, but that then catches your house on fire. So I think it's critical that, you know, if you're living in that type of a community, you need to really work with your neighbors. If you have street that surrounds a community of your houses, like 8 to 10 houses that are surrounded by streets, which I consider streets to be defensible space, then work within that 8 to 10 house community, work together so that you can each do your part to make sure that if there's a fire event, none of you catches fire, which then protects you're protecting each other at the end of the day. So that's
Boom.
where community resilience comes in. And then beyond the communities, when you're on the outside edges of these communities, I think we need to do better at expanding defensible space. I know I'm all for green space, I'm all for trees and shrubs, I'm all for protected lands, but I think if we're going to live in these wildfire areas, we need to take measures to build defensible space out beyond the homes, beyond the fence line, to try to keep that brush away. Homeowners should either be able to go a little further out, working with their local fire departments and determining how far out they can clear the brush. Utilizing long-term fire retardants is another option for these people. But really, something should be done to try to keep the fire further away from the house. So that then again, you're only dealing with embers getting to the actual structure, and then we protect from there.
Hey,
That's a
Brad, I'd
great.
like to mention one other thing when you're talking about the defensible space is I think one thing that was a surprise to me in my career early on and is maybe hasn't been talked about yet. I just wanted to make sure it gets mentioned is the actual fence or gate material that leads up to the home. I've always pictured that like it's just a wick for just leading right up and under the eave, and that's how often a fire can get started in this type of situation. So I just thought that would go for the listeners, and I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, man, for a homeowner that is listening that says, "Hey, I want to do, prevention work." Uh, what you just mentioned, Robert, is you got the wood fences, sometimes dividing the homes, right? And then you have the wood fence that comes as it returns back to your stucco home or siding to connect to your home, and you have a gate. To your point, those are like wicks, like they will burn and they will burn. And so when you look at the entire picture, it really is an investment. It's an investment for homeowners to make, and to make decisions to say, yes, we're going to make our home more resilient, um, and because it means that much to us. And Robert, I'm sure that you have stories about people that wish they may have done some more work or wish they wouldn't have lost their home. And in retrospect, and it's kind of sad to even talk about it, but in retrospect, they might say, hey, I would have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars if it meant that I could just keep my home, and the memories and all these things. And so, yeah, I think, you know, we can leap right over to you, Robert, and kind of like, maybe let us know some of the maybe not tragic stories that I'm just mentioning right now. It's coming to my mind. I'm getting kind of bummed out about it, because I put myself in their position of like, if I lost everything, dang, like there's so much that people lose that they don't realize. Not only is their home and all the sentimental thoughts and memories that go with it, but if you have children, they've got to go to new schools. You have to relocate. You've got all the issues of housing. You got traffic. You have a whole nother life that is now, implemented on you right now. You've got to make different decisions. Your life completely changes. Your relationships within the family absolutely begin to take this really kind of different spin, and it's tragic. It's tragic. But Robert, let me jump over to you, my friend. What can you share with us about what you've seen out there and what Marsh does different to bridge the gap between the claims experience and the homeowner's expectations?
Of course, and OP, I appreciate you having us here to talk about these things. Um, I'd say the first thing and most common thing with the claims process is that the homeowner needs to think of it as a process. And what does that mean? And you brought up some very important things. Most people's lives are very busy anyway. And now to have a claim on top of that, where it's impacting your home, or you can maybe not live there anymore, or at least partially, it's going to give you maybe a year of additional issues you need to deal with over time if you have only a partial damage, for instance. We're helping all these types of people through that experience. And I have several, I can recollect back to that first week or two where I had several homeowners report up through my team here at Marsh MMA that we are so grateful to have you. I'm standing here in the front yard. My house is burned down or it's partially down. We're just collecting up some of our effects. I'm talking to my neighbors. They don't have anyone to talk to about this. And I'm just so grateful that you can reassure me that I'm doing the right things. I'm thinking about the right things. You're helping me think about how to get organized and just start down that path. And just to know you're there. So if I'm now a couple of weeks further down that path of recovery and I have more questions, or I'm being told things that I would like a second opinion on, that you're there to help me with those. And those are the types of stories that are really rewarding and being able to help people through this process. And that's one of the reasons I even became a claims adjuster to begin with. That's my background. So is to help people understand their policy, understand their coverages, and then help them on the path to recovery.
That's so valuable. We've dealt now with hundreds of claims, from doing the smoke deodorization, the cleanup, even when the wildfire was taking place, we're spraying fire retardant. So we've seen, we've talked to a lot of people, and what you just described, Robert, is so valuable because so many people have questions. And so when they're dealing directly with the claims adjuster and only the claims adjuster, you have the impact of this claims adjuster has hundreds of claims. You know, at the low part, they've got 50. On the high end, they're just going from one claim to the next, to the next, to the next, and they're not able to return phone calls, understandably so, because they're just on field inspections. But to have a voice of reason where a homeowner can call, have a conversation, understand what the game plan is, and understand what the process is crucial. So that way they can begin to plan their day, their week, their month also. And so, there's so much value there. And my message to people is if you don't have a broker, you should get one, number one. Number two, you should find a company like Marsh who can deliver these types of experiences, because when you know what hits the fan, my friends, you're going to wish you had an advocate, someone you can talk to, because there's so many questions that you're going to have, and it will create more frustration if you don't have answers that a broker can provide to you. Robert, anything? I'll let you continue, my friend.
Additionally, I'd say the other part that's important is that not only are we helping with these questions you may have as a client, we are also monitoring your claim with your different carrier and making sure that our clients are receiving the full value of their policy. All these policies with different companies have different limitations and different caveats to them on what they cover in different loss scenarios. And so we're reviewing that and looking at the communications going back and forth with the client, between them and the carrier, to make sure that it's correct and that they're receiving that full value. We want to make sure that they have the best experience that they can, understanding the limits of the sometimes traumatic situation that they're going through.
What challenges, Robert, has your team had with understanding and dealing with different types of carriers, right? Like I would imagine there's some carriers that are, saying one thing, other carriers that are doing other things. And how has that been working for you guys?
Well, I want to be fair, and I don't want to mention any specific carrier names, but I will say that in the market of insurance carriers, there's ones who bill themselves differently as far as what level of customer service they're going to be providing, or sometimes it's in the CNS market, as we were talking about earlier. They're not even used to communicating necessarily with individuals on a daily basis about their claim. So in some cases, we have to act as an intermediary there as well and just try to get them some more information, some more understanding. There were several ENS carriers because of this California wildfire situation that we worked with, and it seemed like it was new to them. It wasn't like our main carrier partners that we work with, but they were open. They wanted to have logical discussions. And if it can be a logical discussion about the facts at hand, that's where we can all get on the same page and talk about them, and then help the overall claim experience for the individual client. Additionally, I would say everyone in your area is probably familiar with the California FAIR Plan. They just, I want to be fair to them. They seemed a little overwhelmed at the beginning, but who wouldn't be in this situation? I think all carriers had a potential to adjust to it. And in that case, so there is a spectrum of different types of experiences that someone might have based on who their carrier is, based on their severity of damage, and their individual experience. So, and we try to help with all those.
Agreed. I think that's where, your team has got to be congratulated to be able to have navigated through all those different types of experiences, because we've seen it too. Every carrier is different. Some are accustomed to communicating. Others are like, you don't hear from them for weeks. But to your point, again, having someone that can bridge the gap there, like you guys do, is crucial to be able to understand, like, okay, we can navigate through some of this communication here.
Definitely. And such, a claim, like I mentioned again, is a process. So there's a timeline there. And even just understanding how long different elements of the claim process should take can help we're monitoring that in the background to make sure, hey, let's get this back on track. We're now 3 weeks in. It should have taken 3 weeks, but they're still not hearing anything. So we'll initiate communication there and try to get it moving forward.
Love it. Love it. And I think, Brian, I'm thinking again about what you were talking about as far as the community, um, and how important that is. I was thinking back, like I have a hillside, and so every year I have the hillside trimmed uh, more than what the HOA does, and I have spacing between shrubs, and my neighbors, although I've spoken to them, this is where the challenge is, right? It's like I love my neighbors, but they're like, yeah, yeah, it's a good idea. We're gonna get to it. I'm like, okay, here's some videos. Like, let's just, this is life, right? If our hillside catches fire, we're gonna be in trouble. So what I ended up doing, and then thinking back to like, it takes an investment, right? I ended up uh, having a crew there last week trimming my hillside, and I talked to my neighbor the day before, and I said, I'm trimming your hillside just to make sure we're good. And they're like, are you serious? I said, yep, that's what I'm going to do. And when you think about it, it might be $1,000 of an investment, but I understand that those shrubs, if they catch on fire, are going to ignite his home, and it's going to probably take my home down, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm like, we need to make these types of investments. So I think part of that process is, you're right, the education needs to continue to happen. And I know you've been an advocate of education on prevention for over 15 years, and you think everyone knows about it, but they just don't.
No, yeah, 100%. I think that's where I want to try to make my biggest point today is that as much as we've all as experts talked about this, there's still just so many misconceptions. Talking to clients that have been directly affected during these wildfire events and helping them to rebuild. There was one gentleman I spoke with who spent weeks and days and nights, researching outside of working his full-time job, living in a different house, trying to deal with his family situation because they're not in their main home, spending whatever extra time he has trying to figure out how to build more resiliently. And so we got on the phone with him and talked to him for about 30 minutes, and he's in the financial world, and he said this is probably the most interesting insurance conversation I've ever had, just talking about defensible space and home hardening measures and things that he can do to improve his property. We actually set up a second call because he had so many questions that we wound up going through all those as well too. And then I've attended some conferences with folks that in Los Angeles where it brought together Palisades, Eaton Fire, people, people that were directly affected, and also companies that are trying to make a difference in helping people to rebuild and rebuild more resiliently. And I think the overarching theme is that people want to rebuild more resiliently. They just don't know how. And they don't realize there are resources out there. So I think it's imperative that insurance carriers, as these people were affected by the fires, help them, give them the guidance, but also help their current clients that they've got on the books. You don't want to have a loss. They don't want to have a loss. And I know insurance carriers, they do a lot of work. I'm not going to question that, but I think every educational opportunity matters. You need to take more time and continue to educate people because they still just don't get it. There was one lady I spoke to at one of the conferences where she had an A-frame house. I forget where exactly in California, but it was in a WUI area. And her insurance carrier said, you need to replace your wood fence. And she said, yeah, I need to replace my wood fence is what they told me. I'm like, well, if you look more closely, it probably wasn't to replace the entire wood fence. It was probably just to replace that first 5 feet, like we talked about earlier. You need to have that barrier, that break, that 5 foot break between your wood fence and your house so that if there's a wildfire, it doesn't bring it all the way to your home. And she looked at me like, oh my God, what have I done? She goes, I'd let that policy expire and I went to the fair plan instead
Oh,
of keeping her insurance policy by replacing that because she thought she had to replace her whole
Yeah.
wood fence. So I don't know if she just misread it, if it was worded improperly, but all she really needed to do was replace that first 5 feet of her fence and she could have retained her policy. But it just goes to show you that there's such an opportunity for us to really educate people on wildfire and things that people can do. I mean, even this week, we're looking at wildfires in Arizona. I mean, there was the loss of the Grand Canyon Lodge this week, and
yeah.
I saw the loss of it. I started looking at pictures. I'm like, well, this is pretty easy to nail down what happened here, unfortunately, for the lodge. they had old wood shake roofs on the lodge, old wood shake roofs on all the other little structures and cabins that go with it. There are pine needles everywhere in some of the photos I pulled up that people had posted of their vacations there. It's just, there was no defensible space. The homes and structures weren't hardened. And if you see the video of the lodge burning that you see on the news, it looks like it starts from the top down. Even though it's a log cabin structure, those solid logs will not burn first. That wood
Right.
shake roof is the vulnerable spot on those structures that caught fire first, and the structure essentially burned from the top down. So I think, we need to do better because we're losing historic pieces of, lodges and these different structures throughout our communities that, just for whatever reason, they haven't been mitigated that need to be mitigated, whether it's a historical society that needs to adapt or people just need to be educated so they can make the right decisions about their structures. I think it's critical.
Yeah. You know, Robert, I'm going to want to come back to you in a second here to see if you have any stories about homeowners and their personal lives as far as the negative impact the claims has had of losing a home on the rest of their life, right? On the impacts that that's having, if you have any of those. But before we jump into that, I'm thinking about the renewals. Every single year we all get faced as homeowners with this renewal of insurance, and I'm wondering, well, I would just imagine that the underwriting has become even more stringent. Like, hey, are you seeing that the underwriters are saying, hey, we're going to require this? It's no longer an option. It must be done. Are you seeing some changes there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the stuff we were suggesting 5 years ago, even some companies 2 years ago, are out the window. It's now a requirement. It's an expectation. We had a carrier recently go through their book and say we're getting rid of any homes with a wood shake roof, and my prior experience at a carrier, we'd already gone through that and removed some policies where wood shake roofs were prevalent. But I think it's just one of those things that carriers are still continuing to look at their book again, continuing to re-underwrite their book, and looking for those structures and those properties that have vulnerabilities. And so my team at MMA, Marsh McLennan Agency, we're trying to educate clients. We're trying to have conversations with them. We're doing inspections ahead of time before renewals a lot of times, just to walk through what can you do to make your property more resilient. And these are steps you need to take because these will likely be a requirement from the insurance carrier. And we're trying to educate them and show them videos and walk through scenarios. Like there was one client's house I was at that had an Italian cypress tree 6 feet away from a two-story home, but windows on both stories. And I basically told them, I said, this is going to catch fire. It's going to be a tinderbox. It's going to burn hot and it's going to burn fast. And what's going to happen isn't the fact your house isn't going to catch fire from this tree likely. What's going to happen is it's going to compromise your windows. It's going to produce a lot of embers. And the windows, once they're compromised, embers are going to enter into the home from there and catch the structure on fire. So I think if you can be at a property and show them what their vulnerability is and tell them exactly what's going to happen in a wildfire event, they're more likely to act. But that's just one small example. We've been trying to work with as many clients as possible, but however, carriers and people in the insurance world can get the word out about education and continuing to push the IBHS and these other standards that are out there. That's where I think we really need to focus our attention with homeowners so they can continue to get it, what they need to learn.
I agree. And I'll just add a quick little story about Italian cypress trees. There was a carrier that suggested to a homeowner, you must remove the 7 Italian cypress trees. To your example, Brad, 2-story, and they're super tall and they surround the home. And the carrier actually said this. And so number one, we suggest Italian cypress trees have got to be removed, right? 100%. And that's what the carrier had mentioned. And somehow this insured got the attention of someone higher up, and they said, okay, if you were to hire a team like our company, Allied, to respond when there's a wildfire within a certain mile radius, to come and spray those trees, we might extend coverage. So we signed an agreement with the homeowner. They extended coverage. Okay. Here's the very interesting part. On January 7th, we get an alert that it's within a 3-mile radius ignition at their home. We dispatch our crews, and it happens to be the Palisades fire. And we are literally on site, and we are spraying the vegetation all around this home. She's very grateful. The neighbors come out, and they're like, "Oh my God, can you come and spray my house?" And we're running out of product, right? We're running out of fire retardant. I'm like, "What do you?" And the smoke is billowing through the neighborhood. There's no fire department. There's no police. It is chaos, guys. And what's interesting to me is that we had so many people willing to spend thousands of dollars to spray retardant around the perimeter of the property in this urgent fashion, when really they could have spent that money before any urgency, right? In prevention. And that's the message we're trying to help people understand too, is like, guys, prevention really matters, and it makes a difference, because what if you're not home? You want the prevention measures that you did to just give it a good fighting chance that your home's going to still be standing, versus trying to have a team come out and assemble and try to get there and respond. And Robert, you understand, like it's difficult. Sometimes we can get in, and sometimes we can't get in past those lines that the police department decides to block off. So yeah, I think, to your point, the Italian cypress trees are absolutely one of the worst things that you can have around your property. And for a lot of high net worth clients, privacy is what they use. They use these trees for privacy, and I get it. But there's got to be some different options to look at there.
Well, and fortunately for that client, you guys were able to get in there. I mean,
Yes.
in that fast of a moving wildfire, depending on where the house was situated, you may not have been able to get in there. And I think that's the way that the insurance carriers are looking at these things now. I've talked to them about private wildfire response, about mitigation. Anything you can do ahead of time is great, but at the time of the event, if you're banking on someone showing up, it depends on if you can get access, where the fire's at. Life safety and evacuation is paramount. I mean, we've all seen the videos of the bulldozers pushing cars off the road so resources can get up to fight the fire. I mean, that's going to always be the case in these highly congested areas. Life safety, getting people out, is first. So I think the carriers are starting to buy into technologies that are automated, like the sprinkler companies that are out there. If it's got a water source, if it can trigger automatically, and it's got a backup power source, I think that's something the carriers are looking at. And I know some of the companies have come out and given stats, and they're pretty impressive after the fire events. I think that's a technology that carriers are buying into, because they've now seen a proven track record with this event where structures have survived. And they're not always just spraying water. A lot of times they are spraying fire retardant, which is even an improvement upon it. So I think, for that lady, I'm glad you were able to get there and help her, but I think the carriers are looking at it a little more differently now. Like, it's great for people to have private wildfire response, but I think the work you guys do ahead of the fire is more critical than what you can do at the time of the fire, because the more work you have to do when you get out there, the less likely you can save the house, especially if the house is right on the street and it's coming up quick. I mean, you're fighting an uphill battle at that point. I think it's critical to do that work in between, you know, when a fire happens and when they sign up for your service. I think doing more on the front end is going to be the main focus of what people need to do going forward, especially in the insurance carrier's eyes.
Yes, absolutely. Great share. Yes, Robert.
Brad, in thinking about that and this whole conversation, we're talking about what individual homeowners can do. And I read a paper last week that, just your conversation there just sparked a memory, is that I think carriers are in this article, it was portraying that they're starting to look at not only your individual structure and what are you doing with your defensible space, but also the one adjacent to you. So what are they doing? If they've done nothing, or they might put that into their underwriting model. And that was kind of interesting to me. I made a footnote and thought I'd share that. But if that's what they're doing, it's really becoming a more of a, hey, we're all in this together. And OP, I think you were mentioning earlier in our conversation that a lot of these homes are very close together. Depends on where you're at, how close they are together. So, the things we're talking about in defensible space and 5 feet, that might be 5 feet and 5 feet, right there. It might even be less than the 10 feet between you. So uh, it only makes sense that they're in that together and they should work together.
Absolutely. It's yeah, it becomes more and more critical. And I think as homeowners, if we go home today and really, before we just walk into our homes, stand outside, look at the front of our home, look at our neighbors, and go, man, okay, well, what does this look like if there's a wildfire? And remember, a wildfire does it does not respect boundaries, my friends. Like it is just going to come through and it's going to take what it can. And so, how vulnerable are we really? And I think once we start looking at those things, it might be easier to have conversations with our neighbors and have them better
Yeah.
understand vulnerabilities.
Well, and I think we need to highlight the good things that people are doing to their properties to improve their resilience. I think we need to make it more mainstream. I think we need more videos. I think we need to see HGTV and the companies like that
Yeah.
have these shows where they highlight a house that has great defensible space. Like it needs to become part of the norm. The more like people have this misconception that having defensible space means you have no landscaping. That's not the case. You need to choose smarter landscaping. We need to choose wildfire tolerant, wildfire resistant landscaping, drought tolerant landscaping. Everything's changed. We have to learn to live with fire. It's not going anywhere. We're not going to stop fires from happening. In fact, they're good for the ecosystem that we found. Truly, we need to adopt so our communities can be resilient to these events. We have to keep the fire away. The embers are still going to come. We have to protect from the embers. But first, we got to keep the fire out of the communities. That's paramount. That's the most important feature. And I don't think the insurance market's going to get better until they see an event where the fire stays out of the community in a very highly concentrated area. And it's because of the resilience work that these homeowners have done to do so. Like, I really think that's where we're going to start to see a change. So we need people to buy in. I mean, it's one thing to do one client at a time. We need 60, 70, 80% of homeowners in these communities to step up and start making changes. I think everyone's got to kind of be a part of this because insurance carriers, I think they should be part of it with the insurance policies they offer. Little things make a big difference. I think it also, if you can't get an insurance policy, you can't get a mortgage. So I think, people that are in the financial world need to buy into this as well too. Otherwise, we're going to start seeing foreclosures on homes because they don't have an insurance policy. You're not going to see real estate deals falling through. I think there's a domino effect that could occur if we don't start to improve on our resilience in these communities and with these homes. That's going to be beyond just the insurance world at the end of the day.
Boom. Yeah. And look, I
Well
think you're
said.
right. Yeah, I love that. We're gonna have to clip that, Brad. You were spitting fire, brother, in a good way.
Went out of my head for a minute there.
What you said about like if an event takes place and the carriers see that this community survived, like boom, like that's going to be so crucial, right? And that's going to be the poster child and what people really should do, and the carriers are going to get even more aligned with what needs to take place.
Sure.
Now you said something about mortgages and real estate and stuff. There's we also talked to groups of realtors, and one of the things that I shared was, hey guys, like you make a significant investment in staging the home, right? 5, 6, 7,000, sometimes $10,000 to stage the home to sell. Take that same investment and just invest it in prevention, man. And now your home becomes even more sexier because now you become more likely to be insurable. And so
Yeah.
the
Love
mindset
that.
just has to change, man. We just got to make
You
those.
need to stage your house for wildfire. I mean, you really
I,
like think about it. If you're struggling to get insurance with your house now, what's the next person going to do? They're going to have the same problem. So if you take that money, invest it into mitigating your house, it's going to help you long term. In Florida, for example, like if a house didn't have a properly mitigated roof, doesn't have impact rated windows, there are real estate deals where they have the inspection done, they find out they don't have a properly mitigated roof, windows and doors, and they might take money off the sale because the house isn't properly mitigated to get insurance policy the next time around. I think that same kind of conversation could happen in real estate in California and these other wildfire areas. If the house isn't properly mitigated, and I got to spend, 100 grand to replace the roof that's wood shake right now. I got to do fifty to $100,000 worth of defensible space when I buy this house. I think that might start affecting some real estate deals. So why not take some of that money on the front end, make your house, more resilient looking, and do that defensible space work so that it improves your insurance policy and improves the home's possibility of surviving a wildfire event. And then the next person coming in to buy that property is already got some of those measures in place. So yeah, I think the real estate community is an important one too. I think they need to educate themselves because I'm sure they've all seen where a real estate deal has fallen through simply because somebody
Yes.
couldn't get an insurance policy. So yeah, I think they have as much skin in the game as anybody. Absolutely.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Now, Robert, I do want to circle back over to you, my friend, about the claims experiences and kind of like the negative impacts that it has, because this is all preventable. I shouldn't say all. Lots of it is preventable, and so when people go through this experience, what have you seen beyond losing a property that has had negative impacts on families?
I think the biggest thing is the initial shock of what do I do next and how am I going to adjust to this? There's several factors. We mentioned them, talked about them earlier with, maybe I have children. What's their pattern? They're going to school. How do I do that? Is the school there? Do I have to move to another area? How far away do I need to move? Do I have pets that complicate what other living arrangements I may need to find? Do I have, maybe I'm taking care of an elderly person that needs to go some type of treatment on some type of frequency where I need to travel and be close to that. All those things go into the process. And with this specific example of the Palisades fire and the other fires in the area, infrastructure was disrupted. And that gets into, wind. Wind was, to me, I talk about this in my personal claims and any individuals. This wasn't just a fire event. This was a wind and fire event. That's how I look at it. The wind is what made it so much worse. And, with fire, they can generally contain it much faster. But with that wind, it was just impossible. And people, like you said earlier, were running for their lives. So personal safety was primary in the beginning. Now, to get past that phase and get past that trauma, we do a lot of talking with individuals about their individual situation. And then there's a spectrum of how people were impacted. So there's the total loss where the property's burned to the ground, and then there's, probably on the front end, maybe smoke damage, or they just emergency evacuated and they need to know how long these expenses are going to go on, and is there any compensation in my policy for that? And so those are the situations that we are dealing with ongoing. And then you also had brought up a different situation where we're talking about toxicity that's in the media a lot lately, and the earth movement and how people needed to make their lots to a point where they can even consider building or not. And so some of those decisions we help our clients through as well. Often, and for each individual, it's going to be a different answer. Do they want to rebuild? Do they not want to rebuild? Do they want to just move?
Wow.
It's individually based. So I know in my experience, people want a general answer, but that is very difficult to give. I want to give a shout out to our client advisor teams as well, who hold these relationships with these clients on a yearly basis. And Brad and I, we try to support that process and that relationship and with our expertise. And it's a whole team here working together to help these people through their individual situation. And I wouldn't even venture to give you a generality of helping people back. I could give you some examples, just for smoke, it can be a complex thing. Different people have their own different health concerns related to what's in the air for them inside their home. And so what might be clean to one individual might not feel clean to another individual. And so then how can they get reassurance and maybe some confidence in moving back into their structure, even though it wasn't burnt to the ground? So that's a common one. And then also what's timeline for different events in the policy. So recently we hit, where are we at, January? We were quite far into the year now. So several months into the policy, people needed to declare whether they were rebuilding or not, needed to have some type of communication with the carrier per their policy. And this is different by company. as to if they had some intent and what that intent meant or how it was going to be communicated. Did you have architectural plans? Did you have a contract with a contractor? And there's all these different caveats that come up with different types of losses that we can help with here, and it takes a team. That's definitely what I want to
Yeah,
say.
and it sounds like, going back to your point, every individual homeowner, every individual claim is absolutely um, different, and so the information you provide, based on the carrier they have, also is going to be very unique to that homeowner. So thank you for sharing that. I think it just, again, goes back to um, having a broker that can step in the gap, help interpret the policy. Because as homeowners, guys, like here's insurance. Okay, let me just sign here. I don't know, right? And now when it comes to file the claim, having a broker who can interpret it, help you really understand it, is absolutely crucial to having more peace of mind versus trying to make all these phone calls, not being able to put two pieces together, and then you have this level of frustration just stacked on top of everything else that you're dealing with. So I'm an advocate for brokerage firms like Marsh, 100%. And guys, before we leave here, I want to say thank you to both of you. I think having you both here to talk about the prevention piece and how to be more resilient, and then the claims aspect of it, of understanding the importance of having someone to advocate for you and be the concierge in the claims experience, was absolutely very beneficial. Is there anything else, gentlemen, that you'd like to add to have the listeners walk away with?
Yeah, OP, as much as I enjoy talking about wildfire, this is becoming more of a national issue as far as resilience goes. The insurance market's tightening up everywhere. It's in wildfire areas. It's in the Midwest because of severe convective storm, thunderstorms, tornadoes, hail, etc. It's on coastal communities as well because of hurricanes. Flood's a huge issue these days. I really think homeowners really need to do more to make their properties more resilient, no matter where they are in the country. There's as crazy as the weather's gotten, as crazy as the world's gotten. Um, there's a lot of engineering and science that's gone into studying what can be done to improve structures and properties. And I think if people do their research, talk to their insurance companies, and find out there are companies out there that can assist with helping you make your home more resilient, whether it's to a tornado event, whether it's to a hurricane, whether it's to flood. I mean, there are companies out there that can lift a house 12 feet off the ground, regardless of the size, to get you out of a flood zone. And most people probably don't even realize that's something that can be done. So here at Marsh McLennan Agency, we're really trying to focus on resilience. We're really trying to get homeowners to understand they can do more to protect what, for most people in this country, is their biggest asset, which is their home. So I think it's just a matter of, we need to make it more normal. We need more normalized to invest in your property to make it resilient. As much as I talk about it, I just feel this is the most critical piece I want to leave people with, is that you can do more, you should do more, and better protect your assets so that if an event does happen to you and you're looking around your community and your house is still standing, it'll be worth it at that time. So that's one thing I just want to leave with, is that there is a way to make your house more resilient regardless of where you live in this country and really in this world. So
Boom. Robert?
OP, I'd like to add that I think, and this has been for whatever type of loss that's severe, and people are being asked to, well, what are you claiming? So it's best to have some type of inventory and supporting information for specialized high value items. I recommend that people go through and take photos, or maybe even an iPhone video, not promoting iPhone, any phone video, but of their home, room by room, just so that they can, if they suffer a major or partial structural loss, that they can easily communicate and remember what was in each room. I think if any one of us were just asked all of a sudden, all right, we're not at home right now. We're talking. What's in every room of your house in detail? Can you give me that? Exactly. So, but if you have that video or those photos, that's much easier and much less stress. Because other than that, I know I hear stories of people waking up in the middle of the night with a pad of paper next to them. Oh, I just remembered 5 more things, And so, it's just that is something you can avoid, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to do so. So that's something else I wanted to add.
Great advice, and it reminds me. I have this one client. We did some wildfire prevention for their home. We put emma-resistant vents, and they were in the Palisades. And we also did a Matterport imaging of the interior of the home. Unfortunately, their home didn't survive. And going back to the community, right? When you have the radiant heat impacting you from multiple sides, like your chances decrease significantly. But I'm very proud to hear that, he calls me and says, AOP, my house didn't make it, and they're sad. And then weeks later he says, hey, do you still have that imaging for my insurance carrier? And I was like, heck yes, we do, right? And so the carrier was able to see the entire home inside. They didn't have to worry about the stress of like trying to itemize everything. Robert, like you're saying in the morning, like, a pad and paper trying to itemize everything that you've got. So critical. So yes, if you could shoot a video of the interior of your home to really document everything as much as you can to be prepared. Brad, brother, you impressed me, man, with your passion of resiliency, man, from storms to hurricanes to all that. Like, it's very important that we as homeowners really begin to take responsibility for our properties and not just assume that the insurance carrier, it's their problem, because it's not their problem. We have to work together to show the carriers we're making this investment and we want you to invest in us, in protecting us if we do have a claim. But I think the collaboration between homeowners and carriers really has to be built stronger. We have to commit more resources. The last thing I'll mention, guys, I was asked to speak at an event. It was Altadena and Pasadena residents were there. And, they asked me, hey, give me a last comment. And I thought, here's what I'll say. Like, so many people, I really want people to think differently too. And I want to like shake people sometimes, Brad. Like, I think you want to shake people. And I said, if you have a vacation planned and it's going to cost you between $7,500 to $10,000 for the year, maybe don't take the vacation this year. Maybe take that money and just invest it this one year into your home. And if you have to make financial decisions that way, then that's what we really have to start thinking about. Like, what do I not do that I don't need to do, and what should I do with that money, right? And so I felt like I had to shake people a little bit to really just understand, like, guys, it's not worth it. It's you can't depend on the carrier to they're going to make you whole, obviously, if you have coverage, but you can't depend on them to protect your home. Like, we have to do our part to make our homes more resilient. And so, gentlemen, thank you very much, Robert, Brad, for being on the show. I'm looking forward to sharing this with our listeners. So thank you so much, my friends.
Thank you, OP.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
That's all for this episode of All Things Wildfire. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe to our show and follow us on social media to stay up to date on all things wildfire. And as always, thanks for listening.